What's up, ladies and gents, welcome back to another Payday lore video. Today I'm going to be walking you through some of my favourite theories from the community, as well as answering the questions I received on episode 13. In this video I'll be approaching the lore in a slightly more informal style than you're used to with the storyline series, but hopefully that will allow me to explore some of the most interesting theories out there without stepping all over the narrative. Some of these theories are entirely of my own making, so I recommend approaching them all with a healthy skepticism, and let's have a discussion in the comments that hopefully extends our understanding of the game lore in the process. Without further ado, let's try and explain the madness that is the story of Payday. First up, I had a few requests asking me to showcase and discuss the other alternate endings. You see, you may have thought that it was just about getting the good ending, discussed in episode 13, or the bad ending from 12, but it's not so simple. There are two extra endings that can be considered as feasible, if absolutely not canonical. When these endings are played out, instead of receiving a cutscene, you'll be taken back to the heist failed screen, confirming that these did not occur. The first of the two is the dentist wins ending. Of course, this is implied to be the case in the bad ending, but here we actually make it to the Lament, and the dentist still turns the tables, likely ending the lives of the core members of the Payday gang then and there, alongside Locke and Bane in the struggle. This ending will occur if you are too slow to confront the dentist, miss your first unsilenced shot on the dentist, or walk too close to him without taking that shot. Even if this situation ended in the gang gunning down the dentist, it's still a catastrophically bad ending. Not only would you be hunted down by what's left of the US government without Bane, all the instability created by the dentist would likely be seized upon by another king. And that's just assuming they worked out exactly what to do with the Mayan gold before the cavern collapsed. Speaking of the gold, there's another level of player stupidity which Overkill accounted for. In this scenario, I throw the Overdrill gold over the side of the Ark. Big oops. This would trap the crew in the Ark of the Watcher as it collapses in on itself. Essentially the same ending you get if you fail to activate Lament before the point of no return, and just another heist failed outcome. I still think it's cool that Overkill added these alternatives, but missing that shot can seriously suck after suffering through the puzzle. Seeing as we're near the Lament already, let's talk about the most famous resident, Baldwin. What was his story? Well, we get a little bit of information about him first from Duke.
I think this Baldwin character was one of those Watcher fellows Bane was talking about.
And then from the dentist.
Poor old Baldwin. He was a passable Watcher, but his ambitions got the better of him.
Apparently, he was a Watcher to the dentist many years ago. So to understand him, we first need to learn more about the Watchers. Essentially, they're mortal humans granted the title after gaining a deeper understanding of the ancient Kataru ways and some sort of unknown tie to a king. They're tasked with watching over the temples and preventing the abuse of devices such as the Lament. At the same time, so long as they are alive, it's implied that their king cannot die. In other words, they exist to keep the king's ambitions in check, whilst also watching over the human population. It's entirely unclear whether the Watchers themselves are granted some innate longevity, but they certainly can be killed. It also seems like the concept of the Watchers is inspired by the Book of Enoch, as angels sent to watch over humanity who ended up lusting after them, eventually corrupting them and procreating to create Nephilim. No, I don't believe Bane is a fallen angel, neither do I think he's the father of a Nephilim. I simply want to point out the conceptual origins of these archetypes and how they fit in thematically. So back to Baldwin, he only tried to do his job. As the Watcher to the corrupt dentist, when the king attempted a power grab in the turmoil of the Civil War in 1814, he stepped up to prevent it. As the White House burned and the dentist attempted to open the Ark, Baldwin took US Treasury gold to force his own reincarnation and prevent the dentists. This backfired due to his mistaken use of the wrong purity gold, however, turning the unfortunate hero of our story into ash, but likely impeding the dentist's plans for about 2 centuries. Justice for Baldwin. It's also possible that he was himself coveting something he shouldn't, like the Watchers of Enoch, but I see him as one of the good guys. You may also remember that the old Overdrill secret required knowledge of the name Baldwin. This was specifically Baldwin IV, the leper king of Jerusalem. Not the same man, but possibly, given his link to the Mayan gold, much like the Lindenhurst name is passed on to regents, Baldwin could be a family line long connected to the ancient Watchers, especially an interesting thought when we consider that Baldwin IV was known for wearing a mask of gold. Another point of confusion I'm often faced with is regarding the No Mercy heist. It's a consistently confusing lore point, seeing as it's the only heist directly marked as a flashback. The crux of the question is whether the Murky Water Company, owned by the dentist, are the ones who contracted this heist and offered up the Cagliostro manuscript as a reward. I can see why this is the conclusion people come to, and it can even make sense from a lore perspective, but I don't believe that's what happened. The reason this is seen to be the case is that 7 years later it was the Murkies in possession of the serum we stole, but it could also make sense that the dentist was setting up the gang with the guide as bait to force them into helping him unlock the Ark several years later. Personally though, I think this is too much of a stretch. However, I do believe that it was a king who contracted this heist. The Elephant, to be precise. You see, as we know, the Elephant was in need of a watcher, and with Bane's prior interest in the occult underworld of the Kataru and impressive criminal connections, he was a perfect fit for the king now posing as a politician. The way I see the event playing out is as follows. Murky Water's research team created a serum potentially using Nephilim DNA at the Henry's Rock facility. Subject carriers of the virus were seemingly released, unintentionally, and interred at the Mercy Hospital. With the Mercs seeking to contain their involvement, the Elephant saw the perfect opportunity to sucker Bane into an obsession with the Kataru by offering him the manuscript, and putting the gang in the firing line of Murky Water, creating natural enemies. This is why Murky Water operatives are known to be at the hospital, and are reported to have been the ones that contained the infection by destroying the entire building. Why would they bother if they'd already hired the Payday gang to do the legwork? No, to me, this was a counter-operation by the Elephant trying to hinder the dentist's agenda whilst furthering his own. In all honesty, the real catalyst that set into motion our story. So this next theory is, I believe, my greatest contribution to the Payday lore discussion. It's centered around only a few lines in-game, but more than anything, it's about the mysterious heist mass found in the hidden compartment of the Egyptian lockbox in Henry's Rock. My suggestion is that the reason these can be found like this, in what's essentially a time capsule, is because the events of the Payday story have played out before, likely multiple times in the past. That's why we can unearth these centuries-old masks in modern day. There's a clear thread of destiny to everything we do. When we consider the text on the unlocked obsidian plate, or the prophecies we hear translated by Duke, it's always alluding to 4 thieves. A thief for each temple and culture, destined to stop the madness of the kings, should the Watchers fall. In the past, they have all failed, which is why the story goes on and these masks can be found buried years later, as if those thieves met the same end we should see if the gang do not interfere with the dentist's plans. Of course, things were different this time. I believe this is the end of the cycle, but what action specifically breaks it? It's likely the plate had been read before, so it can't have been the musical resonance step. I believe it was the burning of the Cagliostro manuscript, and the discovery of the final clue to unlock the Ark, the 5-letter word, guide. This adds a lot more weight to Vlad's returning of the diamond, as this was the relic which caused it to burst into flames. In short, my theory is that much like the dentist, the Payday gang reincarnates, but instead of each individual living on throughout the ages, it's actually the spirit of the Payday gang that keeps coming back to challenge the dentist at every advent of ascension. The modern Payday gang represents the final cycle, however, as they were able to foster relationships with the other 2 kings to help bring the dentist down. And in the burning of the guide, they both remove the possibility for a future cycle to occur, and find the final answer they'd need to accomplish their task. In doing so, their masks now represent elements of the ages and groups that went before them and failed. Another question I received and really liked asked, why was the dentist so laid back during the Hell's Island heist? Surely he'd taken Bane for a reason, and losing him would be a serious issue. Well, there's a few factors which I can attribute to the dentist's calm demeanour here. First of all, it's his style. He's seen it all, never gets flustered, and will have a plan in place for this eventuality. As I mentioned in my cycle theory, he defeated groups like the modern Payday gang many times before. Why would he not be supremely confident here? Of course, underestimating the Payday gang would be his undoing in the end. All of his missteps in this story in fact come from an overconfidence stemming from experience and his own perceived invulnerability. That's why we shoot him in the face. I've seen some people suggest it was an out-of-character, cop-out ending, but to me it perfectly encapsulated his misplaced confidence. The phrase, "even a god king can bleed," springs to mind. On top of this though, Bane was already dead. He had weeks at most to live if they could get him free, and his own Watcher was in the building to prevent that escape. In some ways this was an intended trap, and the dentist didn't see how the Payday gang could ever succeed here against those odds. Let's not forget he's all about pre-planning and probabilities. Unfortunately for him, the gang don't operate within common knowledge. This is one way to look at it, but I have a more radical explanation for his actions. Remember, the Watchers were meant to prevent the kings from abusing their power, and the dentist knew this firsthand with Baldwin. It's very possible that he'd injected Bane with the serum, fully knowing its power, in order to get Kento out of his way. It sounds counterintuitive to let the commander of his army die, but the fact he immediately left to open the temples around the world suggests he was very prepared for that eventuality. Of course, by having Kento killed, he'd really opened himself up to fail in the final standoff. But had the gang not been able to mount such an effective fight against him so quickly, the events of Hell's Island would have only worked in his favour. Let's not forget, at this stage the odds were very much set against the gang. That's why I'm personally such a huge fan of the prequel style campaigns like Silk Road, because they give some context to the gang's struggle against a massive worldwide force, and explain how the momentum changed in their favour before the final standoff. Back onto the topic of Watchers, I've had people ask if the dentist Watcher was Kento, and the elephants was essentially Bane, who was Vlad's Watcher? Well, it's highly implied that Vlad is genuinely insane, and even abandoned his duty as a king at one point, requiring a regent, August Lindenhurst Sr., to take his place. In which case, it wouldn't be a surprise if he was a Watcherless king, just doing what he wants. But a theory which I genuinely love and subscribe to comes from Random Kenny, suggesting that Vlad's Watcher was no other than the leader of the Miami Russians, the Commissar. There's a fair bit of circumstantial evidence for this, including his real name Grigori being translatable as Watcher, and his ethnic background being similar to Vlad's if his Romanov lineage is to be believed. However, the real reason this makes sense in my eyes is that Hotline Miami as a heist desperately needs more to contextualize it in the dentist narrative. We know that the dentist had immense power at this point, already holding influence over top government officials. Why would he need the Commissar out of the way to force the district attorney's hand and secure Hoxton's retrial? Simply put, he didn't. This theory suggests that this was a lie to influence the Payday gang to kill off the Commissar, weakening the position of the Scribe King. Remember, no Watcher, no immortality. This moves this heist much closer to the overarching narrative and displays just how much the dentist was able to manipulate us back when we were heisting for him. This next one is a really popular theory that I just had to mention, even if it has already been disproven. That is that Duke is a time traveller. I mean, he isn't, but Overkill definitely knew what they were doing when they made his origins so unclear. You see, the man we pay respects to at the Shacklethorne auction shares his name, August Lindenhurst. We've already mentioned him in this video. The fact that Duke obviously knew more about the Kataru than the other members of the gang, and that this corpse met his end due to clear Kataru involvement, led people down a rabbit hole at the time. The theory went that Duke had attempted to thwart the dentist many times across history, going back in time upon each failure to try a different method. This had led him to his modern day attempt with the current Payday gang, but remnants of his time-travelling past still exist around them. The ancient Payday masks from Henry's Rock were also brought into this theory, with some suggesting Duke had brought them back in time at some point. Supernaturality obviously exists in the Payday universe, so why not time travel? He was obsessed with history after all. Well, sadly, this theory was debunked when Duke explained more about his past in the safe house.
So, we finally know what happened to the real Lindenhurst. Can't say it puts me at ease. I mean, imagine if I would known all of these things when I was younger.
The Duke we know was named after the August we see at the mansion, due to his grandfather's close relationship with the regent and his family's Kataru links. They were not the same person, but were connected. I believe the masks were a product of a much deeper secret narrative and the key to the cycle theory, not connected to time travel. This doesn't explain why Duke has recorded lines on No Mercy, referencing how it feels like he shouldn't be here, when No Mercy is a flashback heist taking place in the past before he joined.
Why does it feel like I shouldn't be here right now?
Fuck it. You here, ain't you?
You're right where you're supposed to be, Duke.
Something about this job ain't right, man.
Well, first off, this was Overkill intentionally adding fuel to the fire. They liked the theory and enjoyed playing around with it. But within the context of the narrative, it can also be explained when we consider how the story was being told at this point. Wordsmith, the story lead, saw heists in Payday 2 as retellings. This is why different heisters can appear on them and why certain parts are embellished upon at each point. Essentially, it's an explanation for gameplay quirks which could otherwise hinder the narrative. So when Duke shows awareness of this and Chains responds, as he is canonically the one telling the story, it's simply alluding to how the overarching events are being told faithfully, but the finer details are up to your interpretation. In other words, although Duke wasn't there, for us the player it doesn't really matter if that's how you see it and want to play it. So, sadly, Duke is not a time traveller. Finally, here's another theory of my own that links some of the earliest Payday 2 lore material with the final site of the Ark of the Watcher. My suggestion is that Baldwin's Lament is the Philosopher's Stone. Just like in the Harry Potter book of the same name, this relic was something that was truly sought out by many over the years. Alchemy was a real-world practice born of a genuine desire to understand facets of our world by rudimentary chemistry. Overall, it evolved into something that made massive inroads into our modern understanding of chemical compounds. However, some so-called alchemists went down the snake oil salesman route, claiming they had the knowledge of how to transmute base metals into gold and live forever. Of course, this was information people would pay highly for, so a form of fraud sprung from what was originally a spiritually orientated belief. As scientific understanding grew, the fraudsters stopped being able to gull as many people, and alchemy finally evolved into a process more rooted in science. However, that hasn't stopped the alchemical pursuit of these concepts being frequent focal points of our favourite stories, and that's exactly what we have here in Payday, I believe. All the way back in the Guide of Bane, we see the Watcher from Bane's drawing, likely depicting Cagliostro himself, working with chemicals defined by their alchemical symbols etched in the background. Of particular note is this triangle, the symbol for the Philosopher's Stone, the item said to be required in order to transmute gold and grant immortality. Now note how the other symbols reoccur leading up to Baldwin's actual Lament. I believe these inscriptions mean that alchemy in the Payday universe actually did have the power to grant immortality because it was an inherited technology from the Kataru. Just look at its similarities to the Heil Triangle. What we're seeing inside the Ark is the fully realised Philosopher's Stone, which offers immortality if you're willing to take on the body of another. What impresses me the most here is how Wordsmith was able to translate a cool, if likely symbolic illustration from the very first clue we received about a secret 5 years prior, and turn it into possibly the most pivotal lore point in the entire game, blending a real-world legend with the lore perfectly in order to explain something supernatural in a way that verges on possibility. Genius writing and a theory I'm 100% behind. And that does it for the theories explored in this video. If there are still concepts I discussed in the story series that you don't understand, drop a comment down below. I'd also love to hear some of your best and craziest theories about the lore of Payday. Finally, let me know how you see this story linking into Payday 3's. Which ending will they go for, and will they try to escape the madness of gods, aliens and legends and make the world more grounded again? Engaging with me on these will help to consolidate the director's cut style approach I plan to make with the entire series, remastering all 13 episodes into one full saga of Payday video, which is almost 5 hours long. Thank you so much for watching this video. Stay tuned, the full secret rundown and explanation is coming as soon as possible, and we're off to San Francisco for another heisting campaign very soon. Whichever you're excited for, I'll be there for you with another Payday video. As ever, thank you very much to my Mean Infamy patrons and above. If you want to join that infamous club to see yourself in the credits or get early exclusive access to my videos, including the story videos, check out my Patreon link below. Remember the Discord is open to all if you crave some more Payday discussion. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you all very soon for the next one.